do say that, I'm a garden educator. My background is in science and social studies, kind of equal distance. I have a bachelor's in social studies, but a master in education and biology. I don't know why. I was a teacher and a college professor for a long time. But when I was younger, I did even cooler stuff. When I was younger, I taught at a wilderness survival school for about 5 years and actually lived it. Back before Hollywood ruined it with all the survivor stuff. My life is very different now. I don't nearly go out into the woods as much as I would like or survive as much as I used to in my younger days. Just to tell you a little bit about myself, I know I talk funny, but you have no idea. I grew up in New York, just outside of New York City. So my sister, when she visits in Lake Wales, I don't take her shopping. She's like, get that coffee on the floor. That's my sister, some of those. That's what I used to sound like, but I've lived in Lake Wales for such a long time. It's kind of rubbed off. So to me, when I was a kid, a group of trees was a park. There were no wild places where I grew up. And I had this longing for the wild places that even at a young age, I had this desire to go find. It's like the opposite. I always hear in every single movie from the 80s, I want to go off and live in New York City. No, you don't. So I had the dream of living in the woods. And I was lucky enough when I was about 10 years old to meet the father of one of my friends who was a wilderness survival instructor, and I took to it like a duck to water. Some of the places that I used to go as a kid are places that people probably aren't allowed to go on anymore. But I used to spend weeks at a time roaming through the Pine Barrens of New Jersey. And I know what you're thinking, New Jersey, that doesn't sound like a wilderness. It's just like the scrub that's 2 feet that way. Some of the most beautiful wilderness that I've ever seen, with cedar swamps so clear and pure that you can swim and drink at the same time. However, since I was a kid, 30 miles have disappeared from that wilderness. So the only part that's left is the parks. But when I was a kid, we used to roam free. In fact, knowing now, we were on military bases. That could have happened nowadays. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about that because it's important to the story of it changed my whole life. So when I was 10 years old, I had met my friend's father that was a wilderness survival instructor. And he started teaching us the bow drill, the fire by friction, which you're going to do today. And being, a 10-year-old, he had given us axes and saws and knives and had set us out to find the components for the bow drill. And one of the things that he sent us out to get is the bow. It's a kind of unflexible bow with a string that you tie to it. And being a 10-year-old at the time, we went out with our axes and saws and knives, and I think there was a good 10 of us. And we each cut down a tree to make the bow drill bow. And we got back to camp, and we were making the different components, like the spindle, like the fireboard, and, we had built some fires, and, the day was kind of wearing on, and we kind of, being young kids, were anxious to do other things and learn more, and we had talked to my friend's father, and, we said, his name was Crow. We said, Crow, teach us something else. Let's keep going. He said, no, you guys aren't ready. So we sat by the fire that night, And we're like, teach us something. Teach us something. No, you're not ready. And now we're like, what is going on? We came this whole weekend to practice these skills. Like, we knew that we were going to do stuff, like for our young minds, we're like, why aren't we doing things, So we're having a campfire like, kids do, and roasting marshmallows and telling stories. And we had asked my friend's dad, well, tell us a story. And he said, okay, I'll tell you a story. He said, I want you to compare my people, which were the Cherokee, to a mountain man. And when they went off to collect a stave or a chunk of wood to make a bow, the mountain man would go off to a field where he knew the sticks or the staves were as straight as possible, and they would cut down 4 or 5, and it would be a yearly process that you would have to hang up the stick or the stave and let it dry for about a year. So that's why they gathered 4 or 5, just so one would make a good bow. And he said, well, when I was a kid, we were taught if we were going to go out to collect a stave, we knew that bow would be providing food for our family, or defense, as a weapon. So we took it serious and maybe watched different places where we could collect from for weeks, if not years. And on the day that we would go to collect, there would probably be some fasting, some real intention about it. And we would look for a tree that had grown up with a lot of other little trees and was intertwisted and sometimes gnarled and fighting each other. And we would look for the tree that wasn't going to make it, that was being outcompeted by all the other trees. And that's the tree that we would collect. Because when we collected that tree, when we killed that tree, the forest became better. Opening up that space for those other trees, it made the forest better. And he looked at us, he said, until you can do that, I'm not going to teach you more. So, this is the tree that I cut when I was 10.
You carry that wood with you?
Wow. I'm 41 now. I've taught this lesson 1,000 times with this. I used to use it to make fires until it started splitting and cracking. But it became the most powerful lesson of my entire life. And I didn't know it at the time I was 10. So at 10 years old, that's what we learned to do. To go into the woods and look for that tree that wasn't going to make it. Or that animal that wasn't going to make it. And in taking what we needed, made the world a better place. And that was good teaching. That was something that affected the rest of my life. So everything that you see up here, and I've heard some wonderful comments. Thank you. Everything here I've pulled out of the trash. I've taken things that other people have thrown away and practiced my skill on it. This deer hide that I tanned, I found in the garbage. Hunter had hunted a deer and just taken the prize meat and left the rest of it behind. So I practiced my skills of tanning hides the ancient way. line their bows in the front with silk, so that's what gave me the idea when I found a ripped up silk shirt. I've made glass bottom arrowheads from trash that I found. So that lesson defines how I go into the wilderness. When you look at spending time with the earth that way, it opens the world up to you. It's amazing. So, unlike a lot of the survival things that you hear about when you hear about man versus nature, this is how can we live with the earth. This is the ultimate kind of balance. And honestly, this is what I think is people's place in the world. Because we have that discernment in our mind of how can we make things better by taking what we need. You know, like a gardener, knowing where to prune back the dead wood. In our society, we kind of do the opposite. You know, think about people that are hunters today. They look for the biggest buck with the most tines on their antlers. And effectively what they're doing is killing the most healthy of the herd and weakening the herd because of that. We should be hunting the weak. If you are a hunter, there's some people that don't agree with that. But that's a metaphor for what we should do with what we have. If more of us did that, I think we would have more wild places. We wouldn't have the problems that we have right now. One of the things that I think this is why this is important is that changes your thought. When you look at it as, how am I going to make this place better? It becomes your place. You know, often I see people come, like groups that come and they're like, oh, you know, we got to be careful here because this is the animal's home. Well, sorry, this is your home too. And we have to treat it like that. So, when we go off into the woods, that's only just part of it. We still have to live this modern life. So, these skills should be what we can bring back to our regular lives, because when we look at it in a different way, we know the world has everything that we need. You know, it's not in a store. It's out there. You know, out in the woods. When people that don't know about the woods look at wilderness, they see like the big scary trees and they think of it as a dangerous place. What I think about the natural areas that are around me is that's, you know, places where to build shelter. That's places where to find food. Take it even another step. That's places where to find medicine. We have everything that we need just from the wild places, and we've forgotten that. We have forgotten that. When we know those things, we're more likely to protect it. I do have some medicine-making classes. I disguise it as chocolate classes. So we're going to be infusing herbs into chocolate, some wild and some medicinal herbs. So when you look at the world as it's provided everything, it changes. But I'm taking it a step further. Not only is it that the world has everything that we need, but the world needs us. You know, we have this mindset of we're destroying the world. Well, we're destroying it because we're not living in it. You know, when I see a backpacker with a big old backpack hiking through the woods, I see an astronaut, you know, with that space suit on. And God forbid they lose their backpack. It's just as bad if the astronaut had a puncture in their space suit. We've been that separated from the world. We need to get rid of that backpack. We need to get that space suit off and welcome the planet Earth. When we do that, when we take ownership ownership of right here, it opens up the world to us. So I've kind of mentioned a couple of things. Let me go through some of the thingies that I have here, because I know it's fun. One of the hardest things to do in natural areas, like without tools, is to provide containers that are waterproof. So one of the things that I do is make a bowl that holds water with fire. You have a log or a piece of wood, and you put a hot coal on the wood, and you blow it, and it burns slowly into the wood, and it makes a bowl. Kind of hard to make something waterproof. So I talked about tanning hides. An animal has everything that it needs to tan its own hide. You don't have to buy chemicals or salt to tan a hide. There are different methods for different reasons. My favorite is what they call the brain tan technique, where every animal is smart enough to tan its own hide, where all you have to do is, not all you have to do, it's very hard, it takes a long time. It's not hard, it just takes a long time. What you do is put the brains of the animal on the clean hide and stretch it and work it. It takes several days of work of stretching and pulling. But all that's treated on this hide is this is a section of a deer hide that I found in the trash, like I said. And the hair was removed. This is the hair side. And all I did was put the brains of the animal in it and worked it. Like people work hides. And it takes about 2 days of work. So there's other methods to do it, natural. I'm going to pass this around. This is my very first one that I did. So I did it when I was 15. That's how old this hide is. So I'm 40, 41. Somebody did that. And you can pass that around. That's a deer hide.
I have a question.
Yes.
If you're using the animal brains, I'm not sure how you got that from
Right.
a particular animal, but that's beside the point.
Right.
Do you keep the brains in the refrigerator because it would get smelly really fast?
Right. So there are two different methods to tanning a hide. They call it the wet tan and the dry tan. So the wet tanning method, you skin that sucker as soon as you can. In this case, deer hide doesn't hold on to the hair very well, so it's much more valuable as buckskin. So in this case, you use it right away. I know people that wrap it in the brains to wait for it to be ready in moss, especially sphagnum moss, which is like antibacterial. So yeah, you use it right away. That's why I think a lot of people don't use all the parts of an animal. Well, first, they don't know how to do it, but second, it takes a lot of work. It takes more than one person to completely process a deer. That's why I practice a lot on rabbits. My friend raises rabbits. He is an agricultural person at Hart, which is Pine University. This is one of Hart's rabbits. And I did a class on brain tanning the hide of a rabbit. Rabbits are just one of those things. They're made to be eaten. They tan the hides. You pull off the hide like you pull off a sweater. And it tans really easy. So this is a rabbit from Hart that I've tanned in a class.
So you can't be squeamish, huh?
Well, here's the thing. If you're going to eat meat, and lots of people don't, and that's okay. If you're going to eat meat, learn where it comes from. Because that will change your perspective on the whole thing. So like I said before, when you look for how can you make the world a better place in your hunting, you find that animal that is sickly or is the runt of the litter, so to speak, and usually it's a quick kill. So it's for another day, but So one of the things that I do, believe it or not, making rope is probably one of the most important skills for surviving out in the wilderness. It is super, super handy for tying things up, to make a bow for a bow and arrow, to make a bow for the bow drill that I'm going to show you. So there is a method to do it that it's called the reverse wrap technique, and it's a way that you can process natural materials or not so natural materials. So these are just some of the things that I have. I can go through the different ropes. So this is just pounded bamboo. This is milkweed. Pretty sure northern milkweed, not southern. Although this is cranberry hibiscus. Some of you gardeners may know cranberry hibiscus. That's what it looks like in rope form. Hibiscus. Alright, many of you know this one. This is Spanish moss. After it desiccates, after it dies and dries out, it turns black like this, and that's when you want to use it. You see, this is the Spanish moss.
I would think it would just crumble.
The technique called reverse wrap, it wraps against itself. That's why it's called reverse wrap. And it actually makes it pretty strong. And you can see that's the Spanish mossiness of it. One of my favorite things to use, and I use it in a lot of different things, is cedar. This is cedar bark. And this is big, so I can probably demonstrate. This is called the reverse wrap, and I'm unwinding it so I can wind it and show you. Because if you notice, modern rope that is wound by machine, this would all entwine. But because it's wrapped against itself, it holds it, it locks it in place, so that's why it's not coming apart. We actually have to physically take it apart. Okay, so to do this in reverse, I hold it with two different hands and twist and lift at the same time. This is one of those things that there's definitely a learning curve, but I've done this for countless hours. Even in my modern life of just sitting and watching TV and reading. So I do make it look easy, but that's where experience comes in. So I twist the top one and lift the bottom, and then you see my other hand flips it around. So it's constantly going one way and the other way. I think the dust, because this is old. You put some both sides. Alright. Speaking of rope and how useful it is, this is my practice sling. Most people think of David and Goliath, and they see pictures and he's like, wah! Yeah, that's not how to do it. This is actually a working sling. And it's more like that. Because you don't want the animal to... This is like just showing off for the animal.
Yeah.
You don't want to do
Run
that.
away.
Run away, exactly. Run away.
So what kind of hide is that made out of?
This is buckskin as well.
And then what do you use, a regular stone?
Yeah.
Are they easy to find in nature here?
So define easy.
Where
You might get a good show in Florida.
Yeah.
You bring up a wonderful point, and I would love to elaborate on it. So I live in a 3-bedroom house in Lake Wales, and my couch is 5 steps from my air conditioning unit to turn it up or down. It is 6 steps to my refrigerator. what we're used to. Out in the wilderness, it could be 2 miles to get something that you need. But that's what people did. So if you say right here, well, what did the ancient people of right here do? Well, on the west coast of Florida, there's lots of stone that's agatized coral, and this is close to it, but it looks something like this. So it makes some of the best arrowheads in the world. So I know people that are arrowhead makers up north, and they would love to get their hands on, they call it agatized coral, and that's right here. So that would be the west coast. So there were caches of arrowheads here in Lake Wales by Lake Walkenwater, because it was a halfway stop from Tampa side to the Atlantic side. So maybe to get rocks, it would take you 2 days from here.
Okay.
This right here is another fire-making device that I'll show later. And this rock, this stone, I found on Lake Wales Ridge. So I would call it some sort of limestone.
If you could make a hole through the middle, that's probably
Well,
lime.
yeah. I drilled a hole through the middle. Good observation there. Yep. So, but what you'll find is people were able to adapt to wherever their environment. So around here you won't find a lot of arrowheads were made from fire-treated wood. This kills this as well. It's a piece of firewood that was fire-treated. A lot of implements were made out of bone. This is actually a punch, a needle that I made out of bone.
Deer bone, cow bone.
Deer bone, yeah. There's a spot that I know not too far from here where the hunters dump the carcasses. They call it a gut pile, which is really gross. So, one of the things that I like to do is make different tools, because it makes the job of making primitive things more easier. There we go, that's the word. So this is a vise, a hand vise that I would use for flint knapping. So I would just get, this is just a piece of wood, one in between. And if I wanted to work on a sharp edge, squeeze that in there. And now it holds it so I don't cut myself while I'm working on that. And actually one of the things that you do is use bone to work on it that way.
I didn't realize bone was that hard.
You will go through a lot of bone. Well, glass is a whole different story, but you can do it with rock very easily. But you'll go through a lot of bone and antler to get there. People use brass for making modern day arrowheads. And this is, I taught a net weaving class. This is a spindle for net weaving, a shuttle, they would call it. So, like I said before, these are all things that I've found in people's trash. Or I pick up all the time my neighbor's branches. This is one of my favorite woods. I don't know if you could see the shellac of it. And that's juniper wood. It's really pretty. I'll pass that around. Oh, and speaking of not having arrowheads and stone, it's a little loose because I had actual sinew on it and it's dried out. So here's an arrowhead, deer bone point, chicken feathers, and something that a lot of people don't realize, in modern archery, we make very rigid arrows. In traditional archery, we use flexible arrows. So this is actually a stem of cattail. Yeah, see people.
Oh, wow.
One of my favorite things to make arrows from are high bush blueberry because they're really flexible, and when you see them swing out, they fishtail, but that helps it actually.
How accurate is it?
So here's the thing. Modern archery is we have a powerful bow and we stand far away. I learned from a little native girl, her type of archery, and I'll demonstrate it. Poorly, but I'll demonstrate it. A good shot to her people was if the fletchings, the feathers, hit the edge of the bow with a foot before the animal. So instead of standing up really tall, different way to look at it. Instead of moving your whole body, she would just pick up. Yeah, get it. And she would shoot that. And it's amazing the differences when you change your kind of perspective of it. One of the
So hunting was more lying in wait after you knew where animals would travel?
For sure. For sure. One of the dying skills, and you always have the best questions. So, one thing that I always preface this with, we're pretty lucky to have a lot of records of the natives of the United States. Because on contact, they were living the hunter, many tribes, I shouldn't say all, many tribes were living the hunter-gatherer lifestyle. And these skills were around the world at one point. There's a very famous trap, I think I had one somewhere, called a Paiute trap. It's a deadfall to kill usually a small animal in a trap. And they call it Paiute because of the Ute Indians, Utah. Well, there's a painting of that trap, of the Paiute trap, in the famous caves of France, the cave paintings. So that's some of the oldest recorded knowledge out there. So my point is that these skills everybody had it. Your ancestors had it at one point. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been here. So I had a girlfriend in college that was an anthropologist, and she was on an archaeological dig in Greece, and they were studying ancient Greece stuff. However, they came upon a cache of prehistoric Greece arrowheads. So I had and they were like junk, I had in the longest time, I had an arrowhead from prehistoric Greece. So it was universal, some of these skills. So great question, keep them coming. Okay, so these skills are a doorway to what I was talking about, that connection to the earth. Because then you become the healer, and the wilderness kind of opens up to you. So that's why those survival shows drive me crazy. Because it's always like the man versus wild, the man versus nature. We're going to overcome, we're going to fight nature. Really a true show of somebody that has really good survival skills, the show would be terrible because you'd be like, hey, I'm living out here and eating lots of food and made a nice shelter and nice and warm, thanks for visiting. It would be a boring show. In fact, I trained with one of the guys, real big guy, his name was Dave, and he was an amazing archer. They were following him around with a camera crew. So how can you go and catch anything with a? Anyway, it's TV. So it kind of ruined our it's ruined our perspective of what really surviving out in nature is like, because if it's hard, then you're doing something wrong. Because our ancestors survived. They didn't have to call in for help. They didn't have that button that push.
Right.
So that was a different mindset. If you don't have that red button, there's no giving up. So most of the time, when we have and it's really just the intelligence, that's what they're lacking. Because they'll take somebody that's really good at survival, that like grew up in Alaska, and they'll put them in the tropical rainforest. Well, go find the people in the tropical rainforest that know how to survive, know what plants to eat, know the ins and outs of the place. Then it becomes easy, but that doesn't make it television. That's why I don't like all the survival shows. So don't ask my opinion; they're all terrible. I did have opportunity. Well, I didn't have an opportunity when I was younger. Was the start of the whole Survivor craze, and everyone was like, "Oh, you should be on Survivor." But back then, if you were a professional, you could not be on Survivor. And I was at the time from I think like '98 to 2001. I was a professional wilderness survival instructor, so that kind of was out. I was a wilderness survival instructor during the Y2K. And I had very wealthy people offer me lots and lots of money just to be on standby. And I was like, that's not what I'm about. You know, like, let me teach you some really cool stuff because it's going to change your opinion about the wilderness. But no, they wanted to have that as a backup. Well, sorry, that's not what I do. I'm not a prepper. Lots of people, that's another kind of like conception about earth skills and wilderness survival. If you're not out there right now doing it, then you're not doing it right. And a lot of the prepper shows, they're like storing up food and stuff. How is that helping anything? You're making the problem worse. So that's why for me, it's let's go out there now. Let's change our lifestyle now. Because we're seeing the effects of not being, a part of the earth. So great questions, everybody. So you've been sitting for a long time. This next thing that I want to do with you is do the actual bow drill to make fire by friction. So I wish I had more time with you all. I wish I had the luxury to teach you how I was taught. I also have a modern day education on how to be a teacher, but I also have prehistoric way of being a teacher. And to me, that's much more fun. Because when I was taught, we were taught intentionally to fail. Because they wanted us, or my teacher wanted us to learn, like the school of hard knocks, I guess you would call it nowadays. So I learned a million ways not to make a fire. In fact, when I asked my teacher what's the best way to make a fire, he said, go out and get some green oak. Green means like it's still alive. And if you've ever had a campfire before, if it's green, it's not burning. So I learned a million ways not to do it. So I'm going to just demonstrate. I know they wouldn't be super happy if I started a fire, but you will. I'm just going to be kind of random in my choices. So this is my thinking, right? So this morning I trimmed these bows from an invasive tree called paper mulberry. I don't know if you know it. And I trimmed the bark off because it makes, I don't know if you can even see what's left of what I didn't trim off. See how that would make good rope? Yeah. So from this morning I trimmed most of it off already, and some rope with it yet.
Somebody just said that. Does this make good tinder? Or is it?
Good question.
Okay.
So what makes good tinder is something that is light and wispy, as thin as possible, and as dry as possible. I'm not sure if I have the right matchup, but okay. Got it. Okay, so in order for everybody to see, I'm going to do it right here. So I'm not going to bring it all the way to make a fire, but you'll see in just a minute. So So that is 30 plus years of experience. I made it look easy. I promise you that. So the wood that we're using today is called cedar wood. So cedar is a medium hardness wood, and that's what you're looking for. Out of all the woods to use to make the fire from, cedar is the hardest. So you're like, why do you practice with the hardest wood to make wood fire from?
If you can do it with that one, you can do it with any of them.
You got it. You got it. If your life depended upon it, or the life of one of your family depended upon it, you know that you can do it. So,
how are you wrapping?
I'm going to go through that right now.
Yeah, that's the...
So, I have always used your hands as measurements, because for each of us, we're all different sizes, right? So, the bigger that you are, usually the stronger that you are. Now, why we're not doing the hand drill is because we live in Florida. And when you see people on TV doing the hand drill, where are they? Well, in the desert. In the desert. So the hand drill is a really skinny little twig. We have a lot more moisture, so we have to create more friction and make more heat. So it has to be bigger. The stronger that you are, the bigger your spindle could be. However, it really saps your energy. So there is a rule of thumb. So the spindle should be about your thumb width. Now, I say that, and I taught this years ago, and this individual, she had one the size of a pencil. And I was like, oh my gosh, I said your thumb thickness. And she's like, I did. And her thumb was like pencil thin. I was like, okay, look at my thumb and do my thumb. So, thumb thickness, your hang loose length.
Are you wanting to start that piece of wood on the floor on fire?
I'll get to that.
Okay, I'll shut up.
So same measurements for the floorboard. So this part is called the floorboard. This is called the spindle. So the spindle should be about the thickness of the floorboard. So obviously this is a little too thick, but that's okay. Bless you.
Bless you.
Now, you will notice that my spindles all have a marking on the top. And that is because we want all the friction down here. This is where the fire is going to be. The reason why I mark the top is often I grease it maybe with some earwax. It's kind of gross. Some nose grease. Sometimes fat from animals, or certain molds, like it can't be water-based. If it's water-based, then the wood will absorb it and the grains will swell and it'll make more friction. You don't want that. And then also over time, these are new. I made these all today, except for a few of them. But eventually it'll glass over. That's not going to show you. So what I do is I put a top line at the top. So that's always the top. Now, I just showed you a string. I showed you the bow should be about your arm's length. It should have a little bend to it. Now, when the spindle is in the rope, there needs to be a certain tension. And here's kind of how I do it. If you put the spindle in the rope and you can slide it like this, I know it's too loose. I would tighten this up. So to put it in, we put the spindle next to the rope and loop one side around. Did everybody see that? Loop side around. And you see it's sitting on the outside of the bow. If I do it the other way, it sits on the inside and it bangs across the bow. So I always put it on the inside, or the outside, I should say. And then you need something to hold the whole shebang together. And this is a rock that I found many, many years ago. I have lots of different handholds, so this is just my favorite. And you can borrow this, but you cannot have it. And you'll see, for everybody else, it seems like this is dirt and not a good thing to use, but it's just my jam. So what I'm doing is very particular with my whole body. And this is where experience comes in. I have put my foot closest as I can stand to the spindle. Sometimes I actually burn my foot. But my hand comes around my leg and my arm into my leg. So instead of just my hand, which is kind of weak, it's into my leg, which is strong. So it's like a trunk. So it holds it there. So now this is me just applying a little bit of pressure, and I know it's too light. If I add some pressure, that's what gets it going. So there's a certain, you have to play with it. There's a certain pressure that you have to learn. And, oh, I just did it without explaining. And the way that I adjust the pressure is with my whole body. Do you see me leaning into it? Instead of using my hand, I use the pressure of my whole body. This is actually a really good stance too, because I'm covering it over. I can't tell you how many times I've done this in the rain. I'm leaning over it, protecting it from the rain. Okay, so that's part one. We're not there yet. Do you see this dust that's around the hole that I just made? Yeah. So this is what eventually will become the ember. And let me get another piece there. I should have started with a different one. Sorry about that. Okay, so that's step one, what we just saw. So step two is now to make this efficient, and this is one of my practice ones, you trim a V into the pie. So I tell kids it should be like a slice of pizza, an eighth of the pie, but not all the way to the center. And instead of the dust piling up on the top, it concentrates it into the notch. So let me show you the difference now. Oh, that's too deep. Too deep. Yeah, it's not the right size. That's okay. actually was almost there. So now, none of that dust piled up at the top. It all was concentrated into that notch. And what eventually happens is when you keep pushing down and pushing down and pushing down onto that dust, it's that becomes an ember. And then what I would do is just lift it off. And you see how it's kind of compiled into a pile? Usually I would have something underneath that, and that would be what the ember that you'd blow to flame.
Would you have your tinder underneath that?
You can, yeah. But I've found that I like my tinder light and fluffy, and if you've swished it down, it's no longer light and fluffy. So usually I get a leaf or a piece of bark or something, and then just invert it. But so okay, I love all these questions. So the book of one of my teachers, I went to this survival school, the Tom Brown's Tracker School they call it, and have graduated 11 levels of this class, so 11-week training that I've gone through with him. And this book, Guide to Wilderness Survival, he wrote out the instructions for that I gave you, 97 pages. The editor cut it down to a page and a half. I could probably talk about what to do, what changes that you can do, how to tweak it, how not to do it for a month. There's so many little intricacies. So, what we're going to do, I made 10 kits up this morning for everybody to practice. So, if we have 10 going at once, that was like, I think, my maximum. First of all, you'll see that, wow, this guy did make it look easy. And second, then you'll appreciate next time that you use fire. You know, if you have a regular car, you turn on your car, you don't realize that you're having little explosions in your engine, and you know, if you have hot water heaters and the like, we've depended on, and maybe if you have electricity, we depend upon fire for the electricity. So we've kind of separated out of our life. But for many cultures, this was a religious act, what we just did. Because it's creating life. Not only the fire as life, but our lives. Because let's face it, our lives are way better when we have fire. It was a game changer for us as people, you know, between protection and light and cooking food. This was important stuff. And it was passed on like the holiest of holy knowledge. So we present it to you now. So can I get 10 volunteers?
Volunteer you?
Yeah, I know, right?
Build a fire!
Okay. And then what we'll do is we'll switch. There's about 20 of us.